And why don't we start with Shabbat Shalom? Even though it's not quite yet, it will be soon. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Hope that you had a wonderful week, and we're excited to share about our experience in Israel. Very informal tonight. We're just going to be sharing pictures, talking about the things that we saw and experienced. Pastor Caleb's going to help me with that. I offered to Jeanette to have a good half hour to talk. She turned me down. She said she won't do it unless she gets a full hour. So, but if she does run up and grab a microphone, we'll definitely let her share too. Ava couldn't be here with us tonight. She is at the hospital working, so we'll miss her. But she'll be here in spirit, and she'll show up on a few slides along the way. But thank you so much for coming. Hope we have a great time, and hope that you're blessed as we share. Pastor Caleb, would you come up and have prayer for us? We'll have some music along the way, and we'll have a closing song, but we're just going to jump right in and start showing some slides. So,
let's pray. Father God, I just want to thank you so much that you've seen us through another week. For some, it may have been long. For some, it may have been short. Nonetheless, Lord, you have seen us through, and we are here at the edges of Sabbath, and we want to welcome you here into this place. You said where two or three are gathered, there you are in the midst. We pray that you would be uplifted and glorified through this little presentation of being able to just see where you were, and we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, again, thank you for coming. We have no script. It's unrehearsed, so we're just going to be talking back and forth and hopefully not interrupting each other too much. Also, if you have a question, this is informal tonight, so you can shout out the question, and hopefully we'll have an answer. We'll see. But we're excited to share about this experience of going to Israel and Jordan. We stayed for the extension and got to see both of those countries. I think for all of us that went, it was kind of a dream come true. I had never really thought, oh, well, someday I'll get to walk where Jesus walked. It was just so far gone, removed. So when the opportunity came, we jumped right on it because we thought this would be a chance to learn, of course, but also a chance to be drawn closer to God, to have a spiritual revival, and at the same time, learn about the different culture over there as well. So that was some of the things I was thinking about as we were going. And Pastor Caleb, what were your thoughts as we were getting ready to leave?
Honestly, my thoughts weren't even cohesive. They were just everywhere, bouncing off the walls, because I was so pumped and so excited. I didn't sleep much the night before, and it was kind of like how I felt before the half marathon. I just had so much amped up energy that we were so excited, and I was really excited to see where Jesus had been. And we'll get to my favorite part, but pretty much I was pretty excited to see where Jesus had been. And I never, like Pastor Michael said, never thought that I would ever see myself in the Holy Land, and honestly didn't even really think I had a desire to go there one day, if I'm honest. But since I've been in pastoral ministry and the opportunity arose, it was like, oh wow, this is happening, and the rest is history. So
yeah, for 2 or 3 weeks leading up to the trip, he would come to work and go, Israel, like that. So he was excited to go. Virgil.
Are all of the pictures yours, or are there some commercial?
They're all either mine or Pastor Caleb's, or maybe a few borrowed from other people. But yeah, these are all taken by us, except for maybe this first shot. We didn't take that shot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I
that's the
don't
only one
that.
that I think is not, because I was looking for something and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I went with that one. So we're just going to hit right to it, and some of them we're going to talk more on, others we'll just get to quickly, but this is flying into Israel. Worst part of the trip, plane rides.
Yep.
Are not fun. Flying over to Israel. I don't even know how many hours, but the trip over the pond was 3 seats, 4 seats in the middle, and all 4 of us were in the 2 in the middle. So trying to sleep when you got a stranger on each side of you, just atrocious. But we got to Israel and forgot the jet lag and just were excited to be there. And the first place we flew into and went to was Tel Aviv. And this is the more built-up secular side. Yeah.
And my thoughts of this were, you'll see another picture here shortly, but it kind of reminds me of LA. And yeah, the ocean was a really exciting thing for all of us, since we're all landlocked here. And we have our Holmes Lake beach. So it was nice to see the Mediterranean beach. And we just loved it. The water was cool. It was very refreshing, especially after. But it kind of reminded me of Southern California, the whole feel. And everyone's really active. I mean, there wasn't a time we didn't see people constantly working out or running along the coastline.
Carol, did you have a hand?
I'm just wondering, you said you were crowded in, so the plane was full.
Yeah, on the way over, we had a little more room on the way back. We could actually stretch out some, but on the way over, it was just packed. And yeah, Tel Aviv, right there on the Mediterranean Sea. Mediterranean means, anyone know? Meta, middle, Terranean or terra, earth, middle of the earth. Right there, kind of centrally located. That's how it got its name. We had several times where we would meet, and this was our first one, meeting as a group. And we would talk and share. And the first night, Andy Nash was our tour guide. Did a wonderful job. I would recommend if you get a chance to go with Andy. He does a spectacular job, makes it very spiritual. And he included us in a lot of it. He did his talks on the bus, but he asked different pastors to share different things at the locations we were at. And this very first night, he had us go around the room and say, what were we looking forward to? Why were we there? And so that was a good icebreaker, too, because many of us pastors may see each other once a year, twice a year, and it's more kind of like, hey, how you doing? Where you at? Okay, good. All right, see ya. We don't really get to connect and bond all that much. So this was a great opportunity for the pastors to get to know each other and to learn from each other as well. So this was a fun first night sharing those things. Here's what Tel Aviv looks like in the evening.
Yeah.
Definitely a big city that we flew into. We didn't stay in the big cities. This was just our first night there, nice hotel, and the next day we were off and running. But this is kind of that first night. There's our coach that we got to drive around in. I'm going to pick on my son here for a second because we were sending pictures back and forth on Facebook, and he said, I didn't know they had cars over there in Israel. And my dad said the same thing. He goes, I don't picture Israel with cars. I said, well, we're not riding donkeys, Dad. We're getting around okay. We had a nice bus that took us everywhere we needed to go. The first place we went to was, okay, I don't even know if you can tell what that is that we're standing next to. That is a whale statue. And so we are in the town of Joppa right now, famous for two big events in the Bible. Of course, one is Jonah and his story. God called him to go to Gentiles, but that wasn't the only prophet that was called to go to the Gentiles here in this town. The other one was Peter, and this is where he was at Simon's house, and he had the vision to go to the Gentiles. And so this town right here was a reminder that we are to not just staying connected with our own folks, but to go out and share with others. And so we got a little experience by the whale there.
And it was really cool because from our hotel, you could actually see the port of Joppa from the hotel, and you could even walk to it. It was probably about only a couple miles, and some ended up doing that the night we got there, because they were a little unrestful, and so they just took a walk down to Joppa. And before we move on, I wanted to mention, I don't know if we have mentioned this, maybe we have or not, but Andy Nash had said something that was kind of profound to just kind of tell you about the different locations between Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. He said there's a saying that while Tel Aviv plays, Jerusalem prays. Just to kind of give you an idea of the different dynamics of both the cities. Jerusalem is very spiritual, religious, and Tel Aviv's very secular. So.
That's very true. When we left Joppa, we got in our coach, and one of the first places we went to was Caesarea. And what you're looking at here is the remains of one of Herod's palaces that he built. He actually built it out onto the water, and we could go right in there and walk amongst it, see the pillars. We could see the mosaics that were still down on the ground. And the beach was amazing because the beach was all seashells. You thought you were walking on gravel, and you looked down like, no, these are tiny, tiny little seashells. And one of the neat things there is Ava. She was on the trip, so I told you she was around, and I loved her little hat of Hello Sunshine. And here you see me
The
and
senior pastor appealing to the assistant.
Yes. We were reenacting something that took place in the book of Acts. This was the place where Paul made his defense before, I believe it was Felix in this town, and where he appeals to Caesar, I think is what's happening there. And so we thought we'd reenact that so we would remember it. This is also a spot where I think they had I don't know if it's a Pilate stone, I think is here in Caesarea. Pilate is someone who's very famous in the Bible, not famous in history, to the point where they're like, we don't know if he's even true. But then they found a stone that talked about Pontius Pilate, governor, and all of a sudden, these stones were reminding us again that the Bible story is true. One of the things that was happening at this point in time was a festival. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I thought you pointed at me like
Yeah,
to say, okay.
Gonna let you do it.
Purim, which is their version of Halloween. That's how they described it to us. And so when we took the our flight from Frankfurt to Israel, we were on an Israeli airline, and they all had like their little costumes and everything and face masks, and they said they were celebrating Purim. And we were in that holiday, and it was the same day, which was Saturday, that they were coming to a close, because I think they celebrate it for a whole week. They celebrate Purim for a whole week. So.
And let's test you. Do you remember where Purim got its start? It's got a biblical, from the story of Esther. When the Jews are saved, they celebrated the Purim because of the casting of lots. That's where it gets its name from. Like many of our holidays that have been secularized, so is this one. It's now more of a party and a get-together, and people were dressed up in costumes. There was little Superman and Wonder Woman running around, little kids, and they were just having a great time. And so it certainly wasn't very religious feeling, but it was a neat cultural experience to walk around and see, and there were people dressed up like statues, and then they would all of a sudden move, and the kids would go, ah! And so it was a very neat time. The other thing that was happening here in this area in Caesarea was this is a, like a Colosseum. This is if you've seen the movie Ben-Hur with the chariot races, this is the type of place where that could have happened. This is one of the spots where they would have their sporting events, and a massive place. And there were two, actually, theaters there, one for fighting and one for horse racing. So we got to see those. We left Caesarea. We're moving really fast through these pictures, but this picture is from the Church of the Annunciation. This is the spot where they believe that Mary was at when Gabriel came and made the announcement to her that she was going to have a child. Some of the pastors kind of complained a little bit, like, my goodness, every time we go to see a spot, there's always like a church built over it. And I told them, I said, well, there has to be, because if they didn't have a church built over it, it would be a parking lot or, a Walmart or something. I mean, that's what we've done here. And so even though it didn't necessarily feel like it did back in the day, that church did preserve it. And it's beautiful churches. This one, as you walked along, of course, it was a Catholic church. And each of these pictures here is a picture of Mary representing from different countries. And so very neat, and representing the whole world, and how that message to that probably teenage girl has gone from an angel all over the world. When you go inside, you walk along the edge, and then you come down these steps, and right in here is where you can look in, and there's where they've excavated, and that's the sites that we went to. There were several they'd say, we think this is in the area. And other times they'd say, this is it. This is the spot. So this would be a spot where they say, like, do you think this is the spot where we commemorate, where we recognize it could have been where so some of the things we don't know for sure. Others were very, very certain that this is the spot where it took place. So it'd be like, a couple thousand years from now when people are saying, this is the spot where Caleb White preached right here. It was right here, only they're not standing here, they're actually standing at college view, because it's close. So, excavation, everything is down under when they excavate. They have to dig under things because when someone else would come along and build, they would just topple what was there, push it down, and build on top of it. That's how so things got built up. Even in Rome, it was like that when we were there. So they would dig down to see the original. And so this is underneath the church, different things. I'll let you do this church.
This is a church that was in Cana. And right across from it, they had a gift shop, of course, and where we were able to taste some Canaan grape juice. And so that was pretty good. And I forgot what this was built over, or if it was just a church that was randomly there.
Just commemorates the Jesus' first miracle.
Okay. Yeah, Canaan was really special for that moment. We arrived in the evening, and we got to go in and see their little worship service from outside because you couldn't go in during it, and you couldn't take pictures either. So hence why we got the picture of the top half and up, because you couldn't take pictures inside. And then most of us went into the gift shops and started tasting grape juice and everything. And some got some were able to bring them home, and some lost them at security because they didn't pack it in their check-in luggage. So,
got to be careful bringing things back along the way. We went home, got to our next place. It was a lot of pack and get in the bus, get going, and you're at a place maybe one night, maybe 2 nights, and so a lot of traveling, but we got to see a lot of places. You're looking at here the Sea of Galilee. This is where we stayed one night. Great spot we were at where we could look out, and you could actually walk to the Sea of Galilee. Some of our group actually went out there and swam in it one night, and just beautiful. I mean, palm trees in March. How you going to beat it? And Galilee, for many, was one of their favorite spots because it wasn't built up in the sense that you're on the sea. Well, you can't change the lake. And so we really got to feel like, wow, he could have walked right along this beach right here. And even so much so that they know this is the spot where a fisherman would have done their nets and stuff. So this is where the calls could have been. So just a fascinating thing.
Yeah, it was very eye-opening for me because, when you think of the Middle East, I always think, or at least myself, a majority of people think dry and desert. And we had got there right after the rainy season had happened. And so everything around the what is it called, the Fertile Crest, it was just all green and lush and beautiful, just like you see right here around Galilee. And Galilee was really eye-opening for me because when you look at a Bible, most Bibles that have a Bible map, you look in and you see the towns around Galilee, and you would think that they're really far. Jesus took a day's walk to Tiberias or to Capernaum, but everything's actually really close around the lake, and it was just really eye-opening to see that. Because just on the other side, you always hear of Jesus going to the other side of the sea, getting in a boat, going to the sea of the side of the Gadarenes, and you can literally just stand on one side and see the other side. And if you had a motorboat, it literally would take just a matter of a couple minutes to get to the other side. And like he was saying, this was my favorite part because this is where Jesus spent most of his ministry, and everything was just so close together. Like Tiberias was here, and not too long further along you find Capernaum. And even right here, you can see on the bottom left side, left, yeah, you can see another town right there. I don't know what that one is, but over there is Tiberias. And so just to give you a perspective of what it was like to be around the sea, it was just really neat to be able to see to the other side and see these places that are mentioned in the Bible that were seemingly so far apart, but actually really close in person.
Andy told us as we were standing there, he said, now you can look and you can see the other side. You could have seen, if you were here, you could have looked and seen, wow, there's 10,000 people over there. I wonder what's going on. You would have seen it from anywhere on the lake. You would have seen that event happening. We saw some wildlife there. There's a parrot. Can you see him there in the... See the red nose?
Yeah, he's a little camouflaged.
Beautiful parrot that we saw along our way. We went to the Sea of Galilee and got to ride a boat on it, which was very, very moving experience. We had a wonderful tour guide. Here's Pastor Caleb explaining how he could walk on the Sea of Galilee if given the chance.
And Ava's laughing because she knows it's not true.
but just all there, and they had music playing. It was in the morning, so the sea was just like glass, just beautiful. And this is a spot I thought was interesting. You can kind of see a valley in between here, and they said that that is where the storms come from. They blow down and through there, and the sea can be calm, and then when a storm comes in, it blows through that kind of valley and just hammers the lake, and they can have white caps on it as it's going. But it was just a very peaceful time. This is our ship captain, and he sang some songs for us, both in English and in Hebrew, and it was very moving. Yeah, wonderful voice. He sang Amazing Grace, My Chains Are Gone, and a few other songs, and it was a very, very touching time here on the Sea of Galilee, and just thinking, wow, this is where Jesus calmed the sea. This is where he walked on water. This is where he called the disciples. Very powerful moments. And so a lot of reflecting time was spent as we were here, thinking about God and our call. Go ahead.
I just want to touch on, from the boat in the lake, on the opposite side of where this lovely couple is sitting, you could actually have a view, and I think we forgot to put the picture in, but you could actually see the spot where Jesus called a couple of the disciples, and then on top of that, you could see the hill where they're pretty 100% sure where the Mount of Blessings is, where Jesus gave the Beatitudes. And right from there to the left, in the distance, you could see a city on the hill. And Jesus, when he often taught, he used the things around him to bring about illustrations. And right there, when Jesus talks in Matthew 5 and he says, "You are light of the world, a city on a hill," he was referring to the city that has actually been there since that time, probably rebuilt some, but he was referring to that city up there. So when people would always walk by, they see that city, they'd remember the lesson that Jesus had just previously taught and tied to that city. So
this next spot is probably where he had everybody sitting down and was teaching the Beatitudes. And so because of that, we had one of our pastors, Pastor Berger, read the Beatitudes to us. And just amazing to hear those words again that Jesus spoke so long ago. This is a spot where we stopped and talked about Peter's. This was when he was at the end of the story, the end of John. Jesus finds Peter again at the sea and calls him and reinstates him, and this is commemorated at this spot. And so there was a boat out there, so we got a nice picture of that. And here's where Pastor Andy is reminding us that even when we blow it, even when we make mistakes, Jesus gives us a chance to come back and to say, "Yes, I love you." And he reinstated Peter and said, "Go, feed my sheep." And so this was a powerful spot as well, where I think it's one of Andy's favorite spots. And here, as you were talking about the spots where the call happened, this would be around in the spot where the fishermen would have been tending their nets. And here walks by a rabbi and says, "Follow me." And their lives were forever changed at that moment in time. We went to Capernaum.
Yep. Capernaum was a very exciting place because this is where Pastor Andy said where he pretty much made his home with Peter, because Peter's house is here, and if he did have a home, this would be the closest thing to where he would have stayed, was in Capernaum with Peter, in Peter's house. And we got to see a couple spots of where Levi was, also the synagogue. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead and do the synagogue, yeah.
The synagogue was really cool because if you read the description, the later century was the white stone, but it was built upon the synagogue of Jesus, which when you see this, the black stone at the very base would be the stone that was around in Jesus' day, that he probably would have walked upon and during that time. And so it was really cool. I touched the black stone.
We were all like this. Yeah. I'm touching where Jesus might have been, right here.
It was exciting. And so the black stone was the original foundation, and the white is later centuries.
Yeah,
so.
Built on top of it. And there, as he was mentioning, that pillar there, they had different pillars set up, and they were called the Way of the Sea. And it was how they would mark their path to the sea. And this is most likely the spot where Matthew or Levi would have been stationed with his table as a tax collector because people are traveling on the way to the sea, and this is where the tax collector would get his funds. And Peter, James, John, and Andrew were probably not very excited when Jesus walked up to Levi Matthew and said, "Come and follow me." Just imagine how those guys took that. But that's where it happened, there in Capernaum. We went to eat at St. Peter's Restaurant. Now, Peter didn't build this, but it is called St. Peter's Restaurant. And here, the cuisine was unique. You had a few choices. Pasta was one, a filleted fish, or if you so chose, you could have a fish from the Sea of Galilee, head, tail, fins, and all. And some got very attached to their fish.
I did not find any coins in this fish.
Yeah. Our conference president got a coin in his fish. They did that for him. He had a little shekel or a denarius that was in there. But yeah, Pastor Caleb is smooching with his fish, and Ava does not look happy about it. Looks rather disgusted by the whole thing. But many people thought, what is the chance that you get to eat a fish from the Sea of Galilee? And that's actually where the fish come from, is right from the sea. So they're very fresh. And so, again, cultural experiences. We traveled a few other places, but that evening, we made it back to the Jordan River, which was close by to where we were staying. And this was a baptismal site. We don't know exactly where John was baptizing. It's actually believed that when he baptized Jesus, it was actually further down the Jordan, maybe closer to the Dead Sea. Because after Jesus is baptized, he goes into the wilderness. And so we'll show you pictures of that. But this is a baptismal site where if you feel called, you can be baptized there. We weren't planning on it. We weren't going there, but that day was such a spiritual awakening and a recommitment day that several said, you know what? Yeah, let's do this. And so Pastor Dean asked Pastor Caleb to baptize him. And so
the water was very cold.
It was a very cold
and
river.
We were the first ones into it, oddly enough. And it was cold, and we're kind of a little bit of the test dummies because we didn't know how far to go down, and I almost baptized myself because I kept on going down the stairs, and all I had was my head showing, and I said we should probably go up a couple levels or else I won't be able to baptize you. Just push your head under. But it was a fun experience and a very meaningful experience to be able to baptize a friend and colleague, and to see other people making that decision, some actually for the first time and some as recommitments. And it was just, it was a really cool experience, a very powerful experience to just be there and just be a witness.
There were people of all faiths, not all faiths, but all denominations that were there. It was neat that, no one was arguing, are you a Baptist? Are you a this? Are you that? We were all there, believers in Christ. And I had the experience of rebaptizing my wife. She was the first person that I ever led to the Lord, never did Bible studies with. But I didn't get to baptize her, of course, because I was just a rock DJ at the time, and back in those days, rock DJs didn't baptize people. But these days, they do. So that was just a powerful moment for us. And again, we weren't planning on it. It wasn't like we had this walk away from Jesus and we're coming back, but it just felt like an amazing time to recommit our life to the Lord. And so I was able to do that. I asked Elder Ron Carlson if he would do my rebaptism, and he said he would be honored to. He's been a bit of a mentor to me. He took a chance on a young pastor when he asked me to take over one of the bigger churches in the conference, and you all took a chance on a young pastor too, so I thank you for that. And it was just a wonderful moment there in the Jordan River. Here was an amazing spot. Now, of course, we know at the Jordan and when Jesus was baptized, that's one of the few times that we heard God the Father speak in the Bible, where he says, "This is my son." Another time he did was at this location,
which is Mount Tabor, which many of us know as the Mount of Transfiguration. And at the top, you can see a small little building, which was a church where they commemorate where Jesus was transfigured right there. And it's a lot taller than I than I imagined it would be. I don't know what I was expecting, but when we saw it, we didn't get to drive up to it. They only allow people to go up there certain times of the year, and it's very seldom that they do let them up on top of the mountain. But it was just really cool to see, because just at the bottom is where the disciples were kind of arguing and saying, we can't heal this person who's having seizures, and Jesus says to them, well, if you had faith, where these things can be cast out by prayer and fasting, but if you had faith, you could have removed mountains. And I just thought that was interesting, because he was on a mountain, and it could have been he was referring to move the mountain of their pride, because they were too concerned about who they could heal and getting the glory for it, rather than actually healing the person for the glory of God.
And they were a little grumbly because Jesus took 3 of them up the mountain, which means 9 others didn't go up the mountain. In fact, one brother went up, Peter, and his other brother stayed down. They were not too pleased with those 3. And so all of a sudden, they had cast out demons before, but now they can't do it because they were upset about who was getting closer to Jesus. So he's gracious with them and with us. Good for us to remember. Here we are. Oh, this was one of my favorite spots.
Yeah, this was another one of my favorites too.
This was one of those spots where they said, this is it. This is not close to, this is it. And this is old. The church is built up around, and then you go in, it's beautiful, but you go down, 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 because everything original is down. And when you got all the way down there, that was the well that Jacob built. So this goes back to Jacob's day. And even more impressive than that, Jacob's well is where Jesus met a Samaritan woman.
This was a very extra special part of the trip, because we weren't even sure if we were going to make it to the site in time, because they closed. And we got there with only about 5 to 10 minutes before closing time. Yeah. So we were booking, and this was the first time that Andy had ever taken, and him himself had ever been to Jacob's well. So this was extra special for him and extra special for us, because we didn't know if we were going to get the opportunity to see Jacob's well. And lo and behold, we got to. And one of the cool things was we even got to drink a little of the water from Jacob's well.
Yeah, it still works.
It's a lot smaller than I thought too. So,
yeah. So this was the spot where she was drawing water, and Jesus said, "Give me a drink." And then he said, "I'll give you living water, so that rivers of water and life can flow from you." So that was a powerful spot. Eventually, we traveled on, and we made it to Jericho. And in the city of Jericho, I didn't realize this is referred to as the oldest city in the world. I didn't realize that. It's referred to as the oldest city in the world and the lowest city in the world, because you're at sea level.
And that's pretty much all you get to see right there. There's not much left of Jericho.
Not a whole lot. We did get to, there was a camel there, yep. And Ava decided to, Caleb was kissing fish, so Ava got jealous.
The most expensive kiss I had to pay for.
and Caleb paid for that kiss. Because that's how they, everybody's making money. Yeah. And so that camel's there to earn money for the guy.
My kisses weren't enough, so.
Here you can see a few of us. We are up on the ruins of old Jericho. And you could go up there and you can kind of see where the archaeologists have looked to see how the walls fell down and certain. They even say in this northern section, you can see how it's different. It didn't cave in like everywhere else. And of course, because sticking with the Bible story, that's where Rahab would have been. And her house was in the wall, and so it didn't come down like everything else. Yeah.
Did you say it's at sea level?
Below sea level, probably, yeah.
What, 2,100 feet or so?
I couldn't remember exactly how much, but yeah, definitely below there. That's why it's the lowest city of the world. In Jericho, another famous story is the story of Zacchaeus and the sycamore tree. This is one that is believed to be a couple thousand years old, so possibly could have been the tree that little Zacchaeus was crawling up. Now, Zacchaeus, everybody knows how tall he was, right? It was a wee little man. What blew my mind was when we were over there, they told us how tall was an average person, an average man.
5'3".
average man was 5'3", and Zacchaeus was a wee little man because he couldn't see over the crowd. So I don't know how tall Zacchaeus was, but he was a short fella.
We've come a long way, I think,
yeah.
height-wise.
And so this was a very sought-out picture. We drove by the tree and didn't stop, and there were half our crowd that were like, we want to stop for the tree. And so we actually ended up driving back at one point to take a picture of the tree. And I was like, I already got the picture, but everybody wanted their own one. So that was Jericho. From Jericho, we continued south, and we made it to the
Dead Sea.
Dead Sea, which was an amazing part of the trip. The Dead Sea is actually shrinking because they're using so much of the Jordan for agriculture and irrigation that not enough of it's coming down. So the Dead Sea is actually shrinking. This would have been all underwater years ago. Yep. And so this is the lowest place on earth, En Gedi. And En Gedi is also the place where David would have gone down to when he was on the run. So he would have hoofed it here from Jerusalem. We took a bus, and I'm glad we did, because it's a bit of a drive, but this is where David would have ended up. And just amazing to think, En Gedi, this is the spots where it's not fertile, it's barren all around. And so imagine you're traveling through and you're like, oh wait, there's water. And you get up to it and you cannot drink that water. It has, I think they said, 27 times the amount of salt and minerals as the regular ocean does when you get to the Dead Sea. And one pastor, Terry Bach, told us, he said, I've been here before, and when I was there before, one of our pastors was like, and dove into the Dead Sea, came up screaming and tearing at his eyes because there's that much salt that's in it. So we were all cautious when we got in the Dead Sea, but we did have fun. In fact, a whole bunch of adults, parents, and grandparents turned into kids when we got into the water because you just float. You don't have to try to swim. In fact, once you're floating, it's hard to get stood back up again. Yeah. So
it was fun, and I can attest to the water in the eye. It wasn't fun. So my hair got wet, and 2 drops got into both of my eyes, and I lost my sight until we got to a fresh water to rinse it out. But it burns. It's worse than the Pacific Ocean by far.
So, but it was a great time just to see all these pastors who are normally, we're taking care of our kids, we're taking care of our churches. Here we were just frolicking, just having a good time. So it was unique. They had mud pits nearby, so we all went over there and got mud, which is actually, all of this is supposed to be very healthy as well, the minerals in it. Andy told us one time he had a stiff neck, got in the Dead Sea, was in there for a while. It was fine for the rest of his trip. So it was very therapeutic as well, but we got there and got all muddy with it, and you can see the mountains. This went all around the Dead Sea, these mountains like that, all the way around. Just a beautiful spot of the world. But the Dead Sea, of course, it's dead because the water doesn't leave the Dead Sea. It flows in from the Jordan and just stays there. Spiritual lesson is when we receive a blessing, we want to make sure we are giving that blessing away. Otherwise, if we're just taking, we'll end up dead, like the Dead Sea. So we had a great time there. This is En Gedi. So this is when you read that story of David on the run from Saul. Picture him like this, hiding in a cave. This type of area is where he's at. And there were tons of caves around in this area.
There were a lot of caves.
And you can just imagine one of those caves Saul goes into to take care of business, and happens to be where David's hiding. So it was just very neat to see the mountainous, deserty area that David and his men lived and hid. And we could see why Saul couldn't find him, because there were plenty of places to hide in this area. The place where we were staying had I believe it's a rock hyrax, if you remember reading about those in the Bible, a little rodent guy who was just chewing away on some plants, so I snapped a picture of him. And then we went up to...
This was Jeanette's favorite part.
Favorite part was Jeanette. Loved the cable car up to the top of Masada.
The cable car wasn't as bad as the stairs.
That's right, we'll show the stairs too. Got on a cable car, took us up to Masada. You're not going to remember Masada from the Bible. There's nothing biblical in that. But what happened there was a group of revolutionaries, Jews, who didn't want to be ruled by Rome. So they left Rome. They weren't really nice people on the way there. They ransacked others, made people their slaves, and they made it up on top of this mountain area.
Fortress.
And there was a fortress that was built, and so there you can see like the cable car comes up here, and then you got to walk on these steps, which Jeanette was not a fan of, but I made her do it anyway, because you have to confront your fears. And up there, you see kind of where they lived, and I was just amazed on all these strongholds up on the mountains that they were able to figure out how to get water up there for all their men and women. There were families that were up there too. And they were pretty ingenious when it came to getting water where they needed it. Because as you can see, it's very barren. This is the top of where Masada was. They eventually got surrounded by the Romans, and our Jewish guide said that, and when the Romans finally got into there, they were all gone. And then we talked to someone else and said, no, they were all dead. They didn't want the Romans to kill them, and so what they did was, like, if you were all of them, they would draw lots, and okay, you guys lost, and so everybody here kills everybody there. And then we draw lots for these, and you kill until it gets down to it, and then the last one is supposed to take his own life to keep the Romans from ruling us.
Yeah, and some actually took the opportunity to walk up, and it's about a mile hike, about like that steep, going back and forth all the way up to the top. And it took them about 45 minutes to get up to the top. Thankfully, we had about 3 hours at that location. I chose to run down.
He did.
And it's faster that way. You do it in 12 minutes, but then you end up killing your legs. So
he complained for 3 or 4 days after that. Why did I do that? I said, oh, the things you learn when you're young that you don't do when you get older. But here's just another spectacular view from up there.
You can see the path where they walk.
Yeah, this is the pathway where they're walking to get up to the top. When we were there, we saw an angel. This is the angel Ava appeared to us. We went down actually into a cistern, I think is where
it was
we're
about
at.
as high as the ceiling.
That's how
you
far
walk
down we came
into
down.
it, and it's about that high.
And there was just a ray of sunshine coming through, so an angel appeared, and then, strangely enough, Pastor Caleb and I were actually transfigured when we were there, and so we had some fun along the way too. And then Caleb did run down, and here he is, staggering to the finish line.
The only reason I did it was because I was trying to beat the cable car down, and I knew there was a wait time between cable cars, so I took off before they even got done getting their water refilled. And so I just got to the bottom just as they got to the bottom. So I didn't beat them, but we came in tie, so.
Here is
the Dead Sea Scroll Caves.
Yes, if you've heard of Qumran, where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, the first cave that the shepherd boy was just there with his sheep, and he threw a rock into a cave, and that's the cave right there. And he heard it bounce, bounce, bounce. And he was like, oh, what's in there? It goes in there, I don't know, dozens or hundreds of earthen pots inside were scrolls. And what's amazing about these scrolls is as they compared them, there were fragments or almost complete scrolls of every Old Testament book except for the book of, do you remember?
I don't.
It was the book of Esther was not there. Could be because the book of Esther doesn't have the word God in it. We don't know why, but it wasn't. This was probably the ones who made the Dead Sea Scrolls were probably the Essenes, who were a branch of Judaism that were very, very strict. If you can imagine the very, very strict Adventists that we have, this would be the Essenes, who were so strict that they went and lived communally. They would take a bath twice a day before they ate, and almost like monks, if you kind of picture it that way. And they copied scrolls of the Bible, and we have almost the whole Isaiah scroll. What's neat about it is when they found these, of course, they were more ancient than the texts that were used to translate our Bibles. And when they compared and said, okay, well, let's look and see what we've got from these translations to what we have here, virtually the same. I mean, little changes here and there, nuances and verbs and stuff, but virtually the same. It really gave us a strong confirmation that what we have, what we read, is the Word of God, and it's been preserved down through the years.
And it was really cool to see where they had their baths, because there was multiple baths as remains that they could walk down, and then they walked up a different way, and their emphasis was on pretty much sanctification.
Yep.
And it was just really cool to see their physical representation of how much they made that a priority in their life, was the process of sanctification in their life.
And they would do that always, go down there and wash and come out. And, you want to be in there first, I would think. You don't want to be like the last guy to go in the water. It's not like they were hygienic. That was just what they do. You get water and then go and eat. So here we found another camel. This is this is Bethany. And we went to, and it's a little dark here, but this fellow right here actually has a sling, and he showed us how to do it by whipping it, and then he fired it off. And
he had a pretty big sized stone in there, and he just launched it into a neighborhood.
It went flying, and we were like, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, it's all right. I sent it into my mother-in-law's house." And Andy said he says that joke every time he's there. But we went to Bethany here. This was where we could see the place, and this was another spot where they said this is firmly believed to be the tomb of Lazarus. And so we got to see that spot. Again, Andy had us volunteer as to where we wanted to give a spiritual thought, and so Pastor Mick Hinton gave us a talk there as we were waiting. It was very tight, so we could only go down about 5 at a time, 4 or 5. And when I mean it was tight, there's me going down, and it was tight getting out of the tomb. That's me coming out of the tomb. So it was not a big fit. You went down in there and just thought, whoa.
5'3" people, and probably a lot, maybe slimmer.
Yeah.
So,
but it was just neat to think this is where Lazarus was when Jesus said, "Wake up." Death is such an enemy to us as humans, but to Jesus, it's just time to get up. And someday he's going to say that for the whole planet. And I can't wait for that day. Now here's Jeanette coming out of the tomb as well. And then we finally made it to Jerusalem, which I was hoping to get there by 7:30. We're not there, so we're going to keep going. But we made it to Jerusalem. This is the Dome of the Rock, which is on the Temple Mount. And so you have 3 world religions all converging at the same spot. And we always, on the way over, kind of wondered, is this going to be safe to go over there? And it really was. Everywhere we went was safe. Even when we went into the Muslim quarter, there were times I was like, should we have more people with us, Jeanette? And she, of course, was fearless. But we were fine. We were safe everywhere we went, and really enjoyed Jerusalem.
and just a heads up, if you ever go to Old Jerusalem and the different quarters, the Arab quarter is actually the cheapest and where all the locals go to buy their produce and everything. It's great quality and it's really cheap. The Jewish quarter is actually the most expensive quarter, and then the Arab quarter is the least expensive. Like you could get a falafel for like less than $1, I think, $1 or less. Which was a big change because along the way we were stopping at big tourist stops, and it was like $15 a meal. And so if you go where the locals go, you'll get the best bang for your buck there. So. And
we ate many a falafel on this trip, and they were good.
Haven't eaten any since, though.
Here we are going into, there's Jerusalem, the major city, and then in the middle of it is Old Jerusalem. And this is where we're heading into the Jaffa Gate. And it is, as Pastor Caleb mentioned, Old Jerusalem is sectioned. There's 4 sections of it. There's the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, the Arab or Muslim quarter, and then the Orthodox quarter, if I remember all 3 of them. And we were fine to walk through any of them. Andy said, just go and explore. This is looking out our hotel. This is called the Citadel of David. It is also Herod's palace. And this is, they believe, actually the spot that Pilate would have come. When he came, he would have wanted a spot, so he would have taken that spot, and Herod would have gone to another residence because the Roman would have kind of taken over. And so this was a spot where Jesus would have been brought for trials. Here's what the shopping looks like. You just go down these steps, and that's probably, what was it called?
King David Street.
David Street. All these streets just go down. They're pretty tight. You know, it's not much wider than our pews here, and shops on both sides, and as you're walking along, someone says, come into my shop, come here, I'll show you something. And you gotta get kind of used to it, because you're over there, you're bartering in most shops, and which is not easy for us. In fact,
when to just walk away. The other thing too, all the ladies got extra attention for shopping. And you know what was really interesting too is we all started to notice that most of the stuff that they're selling is stuff that you would expect people to be wearing over there, but they're all wearing westernized clothes. And Jeanette, if you want to stand up here really quick.
Show Jeanette.
These were the most sought after type of pants that everyone was looking for. They're
come over here.
They're almost like MC Hammer pants, but
yeah.
but they're very light and breathable and just really comfy. And
Yeah, and they weren't all that expensive. Since we're talking about things that we bought over there, I decided to get a prayer shawl, and thought this was something that we could use from time to time. I might use it for a sermon at some point, but and these you could get at various prices. There was one pastor who bought one at quite a bit of a price. I did not. His was handmade, mine is not, but mine was only like $14, so it's more
the other one was about in the hundreds range.
Yeah, so. It was, but beautiful, very beautiful. Yeah. And so this, of course, would be what they would pray with when they were, and if you remember hearing about tassels on the edges of their prayer shawls. So we got a few things while we were there, but mainly just kind of enjoyed meeting the shopkeepers, talking to them. There was one favorite shop that Andy told us. He said, go to this guy. He doesn't barter if you don't want to barter. And he didn't, and he was a lot of fun. In fact, Jeanette took me there so many times. I think we were on a first-name basis by the time we left Jerusalem. She still remembers their names.
And they always had a free baklava
and
lemonade there for the shoppers. So, yeah, I went there often.
One highlight, I believe it was on Friday, we went to the Temple Mount, although when we were at the Temple Mount, we could not call it the Temple Mount, because this spot is, owned, but controlled by the Muslims, and so they will say that, no, in fact, we were walking along, and there was a tour guide who was talking to his tour. This is outside, just in the city on the Via della Rosa. And she was talking about the Temple Mount, and a Muslim man walked by and he yelled, there is no Temple Mount, it's only a mosque. It's only a mosque. And so there's a little bit of tension that goes along in there. In fact, Andy warned us. He said, now we're going to go there, and when you get there, ladies, you have to be covered. You have to have long sleeves and long to your feet, and men too. Oh, we can't wear shorts. And he said, when you're there, no touching of your spouse, no kissing, no public shows of affection. That's not allowed there. He even warned us. He said, we could go up there, we could be there for a half an hour, we could be asked to leave immediately. Someone may not be even allowed to go in. It's just their rules. I think the last time he had been there, a group of Hebrew boys had come up and started singing their songs, and they immediately shut the whole thing down and escorted people out. Now, Jews are actually themselves told not to go there because this is the place where God resided. This is the spot, just a little background, this is where the temple was built, and this is also on the top of Mount Moriah, where Abraham was told to bring Isaac. Unless you're a Muslim, you'd say it was Ishmael that he brought. So you can see all the religions are connected to this. This mosque is the third most holy place for the Muslims. Mecca, of course, is first, and don't ask me the second because I've forgotten. What is it? Medina, that's right. And this is the spot where they built this mosque, is believed where Muhammad went up, was taken to heaven. And the fear is, the Muslims fear that someone's going to get in there and blow up the mosque so that the temple can be rebuilt. So you can see the tension there. This was a spot Andy took us to, and it's hard to get just from the picture, but the way it was built, they could see that the underneath of this, the angle of it, they could say like, oh, this is different, this is unique, this is where the temple would have started. And so they discovered this, an archaeologist discovered it, put it all together, and then the Muslim, and published it, so the Muslims came and said, we're going to pave over that. So no one knows. So again, there's this tension amongst the people. But we were there, we had no problems. We were able to walk around and experience it. We could not go inside the mosque. You're not allowed to, unless you're a believer, a Muslim. But we were able to buy some pictures. So when we're done, you can come and look at some of our things that we have here. Beautiful architecture, very neat spot. There you can see some of the security guards that are walking around, and these guys mean business. They are carrying their assault rifles all the time, and so you definitely are on your best behavior. But you don't have to worry, because even over there, there are wonderfully nice people that are security guards. Here in the very heart of three religions, such a holy spot, and I found a New York Yankee fan. Could you believe that? That is just awesome. Oh, this was unique. I don't know how they got in, because there's security going in, and these guys are obviously Jewish believers, but they got in, and then they were escorted out. And when they left, the mosque is over here in this area. That's where the temple would have been. And so as they're leaving like this. They're all walking out backwards, so that you don't turn your back on the place where God's presence is or was. I'm not exactly sure how the Jews feel about it, but typically the Jewish folks don't go there. They're as close as they go, or they tell Jewish folks to go, is to the Wailing Wall. You've heard of the Western Wall. But these were some folks who decided to go in there, and then were asked to leave, and so they left that way. And when Jewish folks would leave the Western Wall, many, if they were strict, would do the same thing. They would back away from it instead of turning their back to the presence of God. This is outside. This would have been, oh, that's right, this would have been the spot that they said right up here where they would have blown the shofar at the start of Sabbath. And we happen to have a shofar here, and we happen to have a shofar player. So at the start of Sabbath or the start of a festival, the priests would blow this. You might want to not point that way. But this is how they would start Sabbath, and we're not quite yet to Sabbath, but we're close enough, so we'll have Pastor Caleb bring in the Sabbath with the shofar. Maybe you want to turn your microphone off, too.
Yeah, I will do it. Okay. I was just going to say, I've been trying to practice today, because I was doing it the whole time I came back, and then I stopped, and then I tried to do it today, and it was a miserable excuse for a blow, but...
Yeah. And a bit of a miracle for this thing to even get here, because he tried to take it out of Jordan, where they don't sell them, and if you have one, that tells everyone in Jordan that you came from Israel, and Israel and Jordan don't get along. So he barely got out of Jordan with that thing, but was able to. But this here is one of the sections that's still intact. Would have been an outer wall of where the temple would have been, not the actual temple. It was all destroyed, but the outer wall. We have a hand there.
How'd you barely get it out? What you guys...
He had to go through about 100 things of security.
Yeah, pretty much. It was more so Pastor Harold's doing, the senior pastor at College View Church. I think I really didn't think I was going to fight for it as badly as he would, but he did, and long story short, through a lot of hoops and twirls, whatever you want to say, we got it, and we didn't get possession of them until...
Chicago, right?
Yeah, about Chicago. They finally let us have them because they were with the flight attendants the whole way, so...
Part of it is an animal. This comes from an ibex. It's a horn of an ibex, and so that's part of it, and then just other things as well. It was not easy, but we got him and the horn through it all. This is a spot where you would have seen the Romans would have pushed the rocks over and collapsed things, and nearby was a rock that they believe could have been a cornerstone rock. And this is the original pavement that Jesus would have walked along. in this area. I'll have a model that we'll show in a little bit of what this would have looked like.
Also, that wall did have the actual cornerstone that would have been at Jesus' day, that Jesus would have walked by, and Jesus also refers to the cornerstone, and that was a cornerstone. It was massive. It was probably about, from about me to the choir loft wall. I mean, it was just that long, and it was thick, and it was just eye-opening to see how big of a cornerstone that was, because I never really, I mean, I think about our cornerstone, you know, but it's nothing compared to the cornerstone of this temple wall, which was just massive.
Here you can see another section. These were the steps that they would have gone up before going into the temple. And as we walked up those steps, Andy read sections from the Psalms, I think it's 120 and beyond, the Psalms of Ascent that they would have sang and they would have read as they were going into the temple years ago for sacrifices. This is one of the gates that's been sealed up, but it's one of the original gates that people would have walked through to go into the temple.
And oddly enough, at that same day, just a matter of hours later, Joel Osteen was actually getting set up to speak right there at that entrance right there.
Yep.
And
have a concert, I think, too.
Yeah, and we thought it was interesting because it was one of the gates where Jesus would have flipped the tables right there. So.
Yep. So we left Jerusalem for a day excursion, found some sheep on the way, which was very fitting because we were going to the town of Bethlehem, where there are shepherds still today tending their flocks. And it was very fitting that in the town of Bethlehem, a big announcement was made.
Yep, we announced our pregnancy in Bethlehem, and lots of people were saying, oh, you should have done it in Nazareth, and then came back in October to deliver the baby. And Ava, you know, being Ava, she's like, no, definitely not. But we were really excited, and Andy helped us plan the spot and the location to announce it, so that was really special for us.
Very special. Of course, in Bethlehem, we looked and saw, what are you going to look at in Bethlehem? Nativity scenes. And so there was one store that was just dedicated to nativity scenes. And this one is a beautiful one. And you're like, well, Pastor Michael, why didn't you buy that and bring it home? Well, because it's bigger than it looks. See Pastor Caleb right next to it. That was a massive one. I think it was
about
10,000, 15,
16,000 with shipping.
Yeah, it was a pretty penny to get this one home. So we went to a cave because this is probably where Jesus was born, in a cave. We don't know which one. But we went there, and Sue and Ron led us in singing some Christmas hymns, which was a very neat experience. There you can see all the pastors there. From here, we went on and went to, I'll let you do this one.
Okay. This is Kidron Valley. This is where
No, this is the...
Oh, sorry, not Kidron.
Valley of Elah.
Yeah, that's what it is. This is where David and Goliath faced off. And it's a lot prettier than I imagined, too, for a battle. But this is where you keep going, and we've hit a brook, and we got to pick up stones there, which Pastor Michael has some on the table here.
Many of the other pastors were picking up stones, but I actually found the exact 4 stones that David left. I mean, he didn't need them after the war. He just dropped them. And I found that they got other ones. They got the wrong ones. But I got the 4 that David didn't take. So if you want to check them out, don't steal them because that'd be wrong. But these are the 4 that David left. But it was very neat. This was a powerful spot, too, to think of Israelites and Philistines right in this area. And so we got to walk around and see what it would have been, places would have been like for battling. We actually met somebody that was up on one of these hills, and I was talking to him about it, and this person said, oh, no, that's just a story, David. That's not real. So not everybody over there. In fact, most over there do not believe in the story of Jesus. Sad. It's happened, and it can happen here if we're not careful. Back to Jerusalem, Jeanette and I got to go and walk around the wall of the city. You can't go all the way around it, but quite a ways. Just you pay like $6 or so, and you could walk around and see the city from the top. Got to look down into people's homes and everything, and it was very neat. Here I took this picture. This is how you would, if you were an archer on the wall, you could look through like this and shoot arrows out, and they can't shoot them in because it's so tiny, but you could get a a full spray of where you wanted your arrows to go. So that's how they built that. Here is the western wall. So the Temple Mount is going to be right over here, and this is how you get to the Temple Mount. And the Jewish folks, this is as close as they get for the most part.
And they're actually divided in two groups.
Yep.
Guys are on that side, and the women were on that side, and there was a wall between them. And this was a really special place because we also opened up a Sabbath. Friday night, we got to go down, and we caught the rush of every Jew in the whole city was rushing to the wall.
Yep. When you went there, like Pastor Caleb said, men had to go to one side and women to the other. You can't approach. There was a courtyard area where you could be together, but if you were going to the wall, you had to separate. And here you can see these are all papers that people have stuck into the wall, prayers that they stuck in. And I didn't stick anything in, but I thought it'd be neat to go up there and pray, and so I did that. And men are supposed to wear coverings, yarmulke, when they go up, and there's Jeanette in the orange going up there to pray. And then the next day, I think this was Friday morning, we woke up and they were having a marathon in Jerusalem, and so Pastor Dean ran for that, and so we were watching people run in the marathon, hoping to catch Dean, and we never quite spotted him, but it was a great experience for him to be able to run a marathon in Israel, and it was neat for us to see it through his eyes. In here is the upper room, or where they believe is probably the spot where Jesus met with his disciples for Passover, and where Pentecost took place. This is one of those spots where they say it is, but it's more a commemoration of King David's tomb. We don't know that it really is, but there was a statue, and you could go in, and again, men could go in this side, women on this side. And so here I am, standing next to King David's tomb. I don't know if it's really where David lies, possibly, because Peter even refers to, we have David, and we have his, he's still here with us. In Acts, he mentions that, so maybe. Okay, does anyone know, this is a courtyard of a church, does anyone know what could be commemorated here? Can you tell from this picture? Aha, you got it, Virginia. There's a rooster up here, and so this is commemorating the spot where Peter made his denials. This is the spot where, this was Caiaphas' house, and we went down. This is probably what they lowered Jesus down into the bottom, and down below, that's what it looked like, where he would have been probably chained to a wall. Probably where they beat him. Yeah. And this is outside.
There was actually a pillar that stood about this tall that they would have the prisoner be chained to like this so that their back would be bent over and they would have a clear shot for whipping or whatever it is they would do.
Yeah. And so there were many places we went to that were very sobering to think and remember what happened. Here we are on the Villa de la Rosa, and this is a group of Chinese believers who are walking the streets carrying a cross, and they were singing in English, and over again they would sing, Jesus, remember me when you come in your kingdom, just over and over again. And what's amazing is Christianity has moved throughout the world, started in the Middle East, now very few believers, went to Europe, boomed, now very few believers. Went from there to America, boom. Hopefully we won't follow suit, but now it's growing in Africa, it's growing in South America, and it's growing in China. So much so that missionaries from China are now coming to Israel in order to be missionaries there and to spread the news about Jesus. We went to Hezekiah's tunnel. This is why we're wearing swimsuits. King Hezekiah built a tunnel to bring water in, and you can actually walk through it. And again, very cold water. And when you step down into it, the water comes up to about right here. And then it goes back down to your calves. But it was quite an experience going down there and a long march through the tunnel. And it's tight. This is Jeanette, you can see, and that's how tight it is. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. We had one pastor who was like, forget it, I'm not going. And there were times you had to duck down like this and walk. And I was just thinking, man alive, there's one guy in there with an axe. to build this thing. And it was what, 45 minutes we walked through that. But just a neat experience
There was no turning back.
Yeah, once you're in, you're in. There was a few, I think, that got nervous, so they were singing songs about wading in the water and take me to the river and all those type of things, just to stay calm. When you come out, you actually come out at the pool of Siloam, I think, one of the pools where Jesus healed the man. I'm going to move quick. This is coming up on Sabbath, and people were excited when Sabbath was coming. This is the rush of people. All the streets are small, so people are rushing there. Everyone's cordial, but they are rushing around us to get to the Western Wall when Sabbath starts. And the place is always full of people, but the place just comes alive on Friday night. And so we were glad to be there. And it was a very joyous place on Friday night. Men were gathering and men were singing. The older men were, just being somber and reading. But the younger men, they were dancing around together and singing and joyous. And then on the other side, women were there. And they weren't just keeping Sabbath, folks. They were celebrating Sabbath. And as we talked to some of them, they were saying that Sabbath is the bride of the week. And she had arrived, and so they were real joyous. We learned a song when we were over there, and we sang it a few times. It's called Shabbat Shalom, and so I'm going to have Roy flip over to YouTube. We're going to listen to it. This is how it's supposed to be sung. We did an excellent job Americanizing it or something, and so we sang it extremely slow. We sang it like this: Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom. And those are only 2 words, that's why I can remember it. But we sang it so slow, and then Sue found a faster version, and this is a little more upbeat than we were doing.
Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shabbat Shalom.
So that was one of the songs that we learned, and just an upbeat song, right?
It's pretty much about as upbeat as they were actually celebrating Sabbath.
They were excited for that day to come. And it made us all kind of think, we're like, oh, wait, we definitely got the right day, and we certainly keep it, but could we maybe celebrate it more? And I asked some of the other pastors there, are we more excited Saturday night, or are we more excited Friday night? When we went back Saturday night to the Wailing Wall, and there was people there, but it was more subdued. It was kind of somber, sad, because the bride of the week was leaving, and she was going to be gone for 6 days. So it gave us pause, and Jeanette and I walked away thinking, we got to make sure we keep Sabbath special and focused on God and exciting, and so it helped us think about Sabbath a bit more. Actually, we weren't supposed to take pictures at this point in time, and I thought we could up where I was, and I had one person say, no photographs, and I was like, ooh, okay, and I put my camera away, because that's work, I guess, to take the pictures there.
And in the hotels, they actually have a Sabbath elevator where you don't have to press any of the buttons. It actually stops at every floor, so you don't have to press any buttons. So just, to experience their culture, that they take Sabbath to that level where they don't want to even press a button because it's considered work.
And we talked to a Jewish lady who was there and visited with her. She was from New York. Again, another Yankee fan right there. And visiting with her, and she said, so you guys keep Sabbath? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, how do you do it? And we told her, and she said, do you guys get electricity? And we said, yeah, we have electricity. She goes, oh, you're so lucky. And for them, they didn't, but just was really neat to hear how they kept Sabbath and what they did. It was a beautiful sky that night. This was a sobering picture. Elder John Swigert told me there are 6 torches that are lit I don't know if it's every night or every Sabbath, to represent the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust, to remind them of what they've experienced and endured. I'm going to kind of go through some of these quick. These are just shots of the city. Here's Jeanette and Ava reenacting. I think that is Abraham meeting Melchizedek. So the ladies are posing there for that shot. This is an artist's depiction of what the temple would have looked like with this massive archway. When we were talking about the stones that got pushed down, they were right in here. This is where we were standing at that. This is a sky shot of what Old Jerusalem would have looked like, just to kind of reference you. This would be where this is the Temple Mount, where it would have been. It's believed that either here or here is where Jesus would have been crucified, outside the city gates. Perhaps the best spot for the whole experience was the Garden Tomb. At least it was for me. This was when there's 2 locations that they believe could have been the spot where Jesus was crucified. This is the more recent one that was discovered. The original one has a church built over it, and I'll show you pictures of it as well. It's very ornate, almost over the top. The church it's Orthodox. So it's almost like Mardi Gras in there. There's just so much. But this one is more subdued, raw. And so here you can kind of remember Golgotha, place of the skull. You can kind of see there. And it was a rock quarry. Nearby was a garden, and there was a tomb in it. So they thought, wait a second, maybe this is it. And this is what it looks like now. It also would have been right along a major roadway where they would have had the crucifixion, so people coming into town would have seen, this is why you don't mess with Rome. And this is why you don't call yourself king. So this could have been the spot, and this is commemorated as the spot that was the tomb. And again, we don't know, but certainly could have been. So this was a very meaningful spot just to think. In my mind, I had so many of those great resurrection songs going through my head as we were there, and we got to walk in, and it fits the description of John looking and Peter looking inside. It was built just like it would have worked for what the Bible says. And this is the spot where the body could have laid. Elder Carlson gave a wonderful talk to us that night, or that morning, and we had a communion service. And his message, I still remember to this day, was, He's not here. Jesus is not here. And that was, everywhere we went, which was cool. We went a lot of places, but Jesus wasn't there. In fact, you're like, well, why don't they know exactly where he died? They didn't need to. He was alive. I mean, right? If you buried a loved one, and we do, next week, Memorial Day, many of us are going to go to where our loved ones are buried. Remember, but if they came back to life, would you go back to the grave? No, because they're alive. So it's just been years later that we started remembering it. But he kept saying, he's not here. He's in heaven. And he's with us everywhere we go. So a powerful message there. And we celebrated communion, which was very meaningful. This was up on the Mount of Olives, looking back onto where the temple would have been. And here is a sealed gate. And it's believed by the Jewish tradition that the Messiah will come through this gate. And so the Muslims boarded it up. And where we're standing, taking this picture, there are tons of tombs right in front of us. And so the Muslims went and put tons of their own tombs and crypts right there, so that when the resurrection happens, they'll be the first ones in when the Messiah comes, in front of the Jewish folks. So you can see this kind of tension that goes along between the faiths. So there's a closer up shot. You can see all of these are tombs buried above the ground because it's rock. You can't dig down in. Anyone know where we're at now? Gethsemane. Another very powerful spot to walk around, to see these trees that have been around for a long time. Some, they figure, back to Jesus' day. And this is the church that represents the spot where he would have prayed. You could go in there, and of course there were people touching and praying and kneeling right by that spot. I don't know if that was the exact spot or not, but that's what's remembered. This is the Pool of Bethesda. This was our last talk that was done by one of our pastor's wives. That's kind of what it looks like. So when you picture the Pool of Bethesda, this is the remains of it. Oh, this is
Church.
This is the church where we sang. They have amazing echo, so I'm going to turn this on and hopefully we'll get the sound. Hopefully I gave enough to the guys. Let's see if it'll start off of my click. Nope. Let's try it this way. Oh, I hit played earlier. Well, we won't stay with it too long. Now my clicker doesn't even want to work. Oy, what have I done? All right, we'll just have to roll. Play it for you afterwards if you want to hear. But echoes were just amazing, and so we sang
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace.
And a handful of songs.
How
in the
Great Thou
church.
Art, and it just gave you chills. This is the church, the Holy Sepulchre, the other place that could have been where Jesus was crucified and buried. They had big processions coming out, big parade of people. You went in and people were kneeling down at this spot, the spot that maybe he was laid down, and they were kissing it. And it was, spiritual for others, not as much for us, I don't think. Beautiful artwork, very ornate. This is one of the spots, and just candles and lights everywhere. And you had to walk in a line and come down here, and then you could crawl underneath of this to touch something. So it worked for some. This is Saturday night back at the Wailing Wall, and then we left the Old Jerusalem, went to New Jerusalem. This is Kyle and Annie. Annie is sister to Megan Hoffmeyer, and Annie was very popular in Jerusalem because she had blonde hair. And so we were walking through a street, Jeanette and Annie and I, and a couple of the guys who were just standing on the street were like, "Oh, so beautiful, so beautiful, oh my." And so Jeanette and I told Annie, who's just a young thing, we said, "You walk back across with us. Let's not have you go alone." And so we did our stuff in our room, went back across, and again, those guys were there, and they're like, "Oh, so beautiful, so beautiful. I offer you 10,000 camels, 10,000 camels for her." And Kyle, her husband, wasn't there. I said, "Kyle, I could have been a rich man. I should have said, where are these camels at?" But we were always safe. We went out that night and got gelato. And across the way was a guy, you can't see him, it's probably too dark, but he is all in Jewish garb, and he was shredding that guitar, playing rock songs. So I was like, this is unique here in Jerusalem. There we said goodbye to Andy, and we went off to Jordan. I'm going to go through these quick. These are just camels on the side of the road.
Part of the 10,000?
Yeah, part of the 10,000, right? We went up on Mount Nebo, which is the spot where Moses stood to look out to see the everything. We went on the fortress where John the Baptist was imprisoned, and we got to see what was left there. That was a neat thought of where faithfulness to God can lead you. And John said, and it was a long journey to where Jesus was, and he sent his disciples, "Go and ask Jesus if he's the one." And Jesus replies back, "Tell him that the blind can see, the lame can walk," and he quotes the Old Testament. But in his quoting of the Old Testament of everything that's happening, the one thing that Jesus doesn't say is he doesn't say, "and the captives are set free," which is from the Old Testament, but Jesus leaves it out. As if to say, John, this stuff is happening, but it's not going to happen for you. Can you still have faith when good things are happening to other people and it's not happening to you? And John, of course, did. He believed all the way to death. Here we are, Jordan. The big event was going to Petra, and so here we are on the way there. Beautiful rocks, mountains that you're walking through, and then all of a sudden you turn and boom, there it is, just like you're in the movie Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And that thing is massive. These are the people, and that's how small it is, and that's how big it is. These are 2 soldiers right there. It is huge and very neat to see. Caves we walked through. There's Indiana Jones up there, very excited. How about that for rock outcropping? This is just the way God painted it. There was some shops there where you could buy different things, and this is incense, frankincense, myrrh, and different things. We bought some of them, so when we're done here, you can come up and Jeanette will kind of show you what myrrh and frankincense smell like, different things that we picked up there. Then we got on some jeeps and we rode through the Wadi Rum desert. It was very neat. We went camping there. We ran up a big mountain. It was a big mountain dune that we ran up, and just had a ball on these, they called them jeeps, but it was really the pickup trucks that we went through. And sunset came in. That was our driver, who I'm pretty sure is the same age as my son, but he was driving, and he was good. He did a good job going up and down those mountain dunes. This was the type of spot that Moses and the Israelites would have walked through as they were entering into the Promised Land. They would have walked through places just like this. Stayed at a Bedouin camp and received some, was it tea they gave us? Tea from the Bedouins. They just live in tents, and they have a summer spot and a winter spot that they go to, and very hospitable. Then this was the place that we stayed for the night. We tented, although please don't think that we were out there roughing it, because we weren't.
It was glamping.
It was glamping, yes. There's the inside of our tent that we were in. This is the food. They cooked the food in the ground that we had there, and then they brought the food up out of it. It was very good food, and we enjoyed it that night. And then we had some entertainment. This fellow, there has a hand full of food there, full of food there, full of food there, and this is full of salsa on his head. And I actually have a video of him, and he comes out with a tray of hot tea on his head, and they were dancing around, and he was like this, and he got down on the ground and back up, and he spilled a drop. I mean, it was very impressive. And so that was kind of our entertainment that night. It was interesting, though, with the dancing and stuff. It was just men that were there, and just men that were really working there. There weren't any females there. And so very neat culture that we got to experience. Got to ride a camel. So there on the desert was Jeanette and a few of the others, Rosie from CBC, riding camels. I think they sang the song, Riding on a Camel, a Camel, a Camel. I was very nervous around the thing, because they happened to tell us that one of the camels ripped off an arm of a Bedouin at one point in time, and then they were like, "Here, hold this." I'm like, ah. See, I let Jeanette get closer to it than I did. But we survived with our arms intact. Here we ended up in
Amman.
Where are we at? We're in
Jordan.
Jordan's capital city of Amman, capital there. The
Temple of Hercules.
Temple of Hercules we saw. And we're temple to pagan gods as well. And there's the ones who stayed for the Jordan trip. And here we are, excited to get on the plane and to head back home. And then this was the thought I wanted to leave you with. He is not here. Jesus was not there. He's wherever we're gathered together. But going there helps bring the Bible to life. Reading the Bible now, I'm like, oh yeah, I can picture that. So we'll close with a song that we found after we got home, but I want to see if it's 8:30, so we're way past time, and I apologize to Vanessa, who always does a good job of keeping these things at an hour long, but she knew that we would destroy that. So, any questions that anybody has that they wanted to ask Chris?
You went to a bakery in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
They have a King David cake and cookies there.
Oh, did they have cookies there? Not that we got to, but there was a lot of stuff about David there, for sure. Any other? Yeah, Rich?
As far as the western wall, I don't know if we're able to, what's on the other side, or is it an outer wall?
It's an outer wall that would have been surrounding, you would have had the temple complex, this would have been the outer wall surrounding it, what was left and not destroyed.
So on the other side was the Dome of the Rock.
Yeah, you would have been the courtyard to the Dome of the Rock. Jill? They had them there. It was a baptismal site where you would get the gown. I think you could keep it if you really wanted to, but but we would recycle it so it could be used again. Yeah, and we got a certificate that said we were baptized there, and we did. Yeah, it's in my office. I have a bottle of water from the Jordan, and this is a bottle of water from the Dead Sea. Please don't drink it. But we did. My wife smuggled it back through customs. Yeah, Gofu.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've got to figure out why you have to baptize within Jerusalem.
Why you have to be baptized?
Yeah, why you baptize there.
Oh, it was just a thought of, this was where Jesus was baptized. Yeah.
Can I answer this one?
Yeah.
Because I struggled with that, because I've been baptized. I was baptized as a baby, and then I got baptized as an adult. I wanted to, but I didn't want to do it because that's where Jesus was.
There you go.
I did it because of the spiritual reconnection I felt while I was there. Husbands and wives renew their vows. I looked at this as a renewal of my vow between Christ and I. Amen. And so I really struggled with that because most people get rebaptized when they've walked away or have come to a new truth. I was doing it as a recommitment, and I think that's what a lot of people did.
Yeah, and not everybody did. There were just some that chose to, and it was just something that we felt was appropriate. Yeah, there was a hand over there.
You were talking about average height amongst the kids.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that Jesus was like everyone else, could he have possibly been that?
I think so. I think you probably would have been average height. You probably would have been about 5'3". And so it was very, very neat to think of that difference. Any other questions? I don't want to keep you too late. We'll have a closing song here. We'll have Roy put it up. This is one that we found when we were looking for Shabbat Shalom. But again, just looking for Sabbath songs. And we've got a few here in the Adventist Church, but we don't have a ton. If you look in our hymnal, and we don't sing them all that much. And I was like, man, most of them are kind of like, the sun is setting in the west. And it's like, ugh. And so we're looking for Sabbath songs that were kind of joyous. And so we found this one, and we thought we would close with this. Not this one, the other one, Roy. So we'll let Roy find that other link there. And this is one we found, and it's now been a part of our Friday night worships at our house. And as we sing it, we can think back to what it was like to worship with all those Sabbath believers in Jerusalem. So this one is called, I think it's called Shabbat Shalom.
When the
also.
sun has set on a Friday night, bringing peace into your home, families will gather all around singing Shabbat Shalom. Everybody sing Shalom. A gift from God, so put a smile upon your face. He's got the whole world in his hands, so obey his commands and you will know peace. Shalom. Shalom. Shabbat.
So this is a song that we've just discovered. We wanted to share it with you. Hope that you enjoyed it and the pictures that we have shown. But just a happy song. So this is kind of how we bring in the Sabbath now on Friday nights. And I played it for Pastor Caleb. He said, I think we could probably learn that. So this may be something that we sing sometime for church. So you guys have all heard it now, so you got to sing out loud. As we close, we'll have closing prayer. And there are some treats out there as well, and there's some things to look out here, things that we brought back. Jeanette can kind of show you all, and I did get anointing oil. That is nard, so you can smell that also. But please be careful. Don't open the Dead Sea water, because you won't want to taste that. But Pastor Caleb, would you have prayer for us as we end?
Father God, thank you so much for coming down to this earth and walking with us and being with us. And now you have risen and you are in heaven interceding on our behalf, working out salvation for mankind. And I pray that you continue to lead and guide each person here, and that you would draw us closer to yourself. And Jesus, I pray that you would come soon, so that one day we would not have to worry about the sun ever setting, for you will reign with us. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Happy Sabbath, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.